Of course, Carnival Cruise Company and the Walt Disney Company were devastated by the coronavirus pandemic. Their businesses had to temporarily shut their doors to customers. As a result, and to conserve cash, both the Walt Disney Company and Carnival Cruise Line paused or canceled their dividend payments. So in this video, I'm going to take a look at a few of the metrics of these two rebounding companies and answer which one is more likely to restart their dividend payments. So let's get right into it. So the first thing I want to look at when I'm trying to answer which company is more likely to restart the dividend is profits, net income to be precise. So over the trailing 12 months, what you could see looking back 10 years is the big fall off in profitability for each of these companies as a result of the pandemic. Disney's profits fell from over 8 billion to negative 4 billion. Carnival Cruise fell from around 4 billion to negative 10, 12, 13 billion. Right? Carnival Cruise was more devastated than Disney because nearly 100% of their revenue was shut off, right? Whereas Disney only I would say 40 to 50% of their revenues were impacted as a result of the pandemic because they still had the cable TV business, they still had the streaming segment, and so they were still able to generate revenue even while the theme parks, the hotels, the cruise ships had to be shut down for a while. But looking at the recovery, we could see that Disney has already started generating profits again, very good profits. In fact, in its most recent update, Disney generated $4.1 billion in profits, and they've been up here in the billions in profits for several quarters now. So they've recovered, they're back to profitability, and they're improving. Carnival Cruise, meanwhile, still negative in terms of profitability, negative 3.46 billion. They are improving dramatically, although they are still negative in profitability. And remember, dividends are paid out of profits. Now, dividends can be paid from other sources like borrowing, like selling assets, but those are not sustainable. And I don't think Carnival Cruise will restart the dividend through unsustainable sources like debt or asset sales. The next thing I wanted to look at is free cash flow, because even though profitability might be strong, there still might be a need to use some of those profits to reinvest in the business, and which would leave less free cash flow available to pay dividends. And looking at this, again, Disney generating billions and most recently 1.4 billion in free cash flow in its most recent update. Meanwhile, Carnival Cruise again improving strongly, right? A very strong recovery, but still negative in terms of free cash flow, negative 2.4 billion. And the last metric I will look at is total long-term debt. And each of these companies, Walt Disney and Carnival Cruise, had to take on additional billions of dollars in debt right at the onset of the pandemic for two reasons. Number one, there was a lot of uncertainty and they didn't know how long their businesses needed to be shut down for. So they went out and they borrowed billions of dollars. And the second reason they took on maybe more than they needed was because interest rates were extremely low right after the onset of the pandemic. So they took advantage of the lower interest rates. So they both tacked on billions of dollars in debt. And the reason why I bring this up is because it may be more prudent for Disney and Carnival, instead of to paying a dividend, to pay down some of that debt, right? So that may be a more prudent decision because debt, remember, generates a interest expense which they have to pay every quarter, every 6 months, whereas a dividend is not really something they are forced to pay. So it's a choice. So they may choose to pay the thing they have to pay before they make the payment on the discretionary spending. And Disney has already done that, right? If you look at their long-term debt, it reached a high of around 60 billion and then they've paid that down all the way down to 48 billion. So they've already made nice progress, $12 billion almost in paying down debt. Carnival has yet to start paying down debt. Although in the most recent quarterly update, they did mention that they paid down over $1 billion in debt. And so you may not see it because 1 billion out of 34 billion is small in comparison. So if I had to answer which company will be quicker to restart their dividend, I would say the Walt Disney Company, for all of the reasons I covered in this video. All right, but that's all I've got in this video. Thank you so much for watching. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.